What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have yet another collection update for you. So this one, I got a lot of stuff that I got before I left for Maryland Death Fest that I just didn't have time to listen to all of it, and had to come back, jam all of it. And I wanted to make sure that I kept the Maryland Death Fest haul separate from this one because I got a lot of stuff there too. But this one's got a lot of cool stuff in it. It got some new releases that we didn't have time to go over. I've got stuff that was sent to me from 3 different people this time. Some stuff from the Metalhead box. I also got some cool stuff from Night Shift merch. And once again, the fine people at Headsplit Records sent us some delicious nuggets of gory, nasty metal. And yeah, we always appreciate that here. So yeah, got a lot of stuff to go over here. So let's just get right down to it. Bossk 4. This is a compilation from this UK post-metal / Sledg Medal Act. I've been a fan of this band for years. I got into them with their album simply titled 2 and became an even bigger fan with Autonoesis, which I think is just fantastic. And I thought this was a new release, but as it turns out, this is a compilation of reworked songs, some collaborations, and just essentially like some odds and ends that they wanted to get out in the collection, and I really dig it. I mean, this band has such an awesome sound, blending heavy, droning riffs with lush atmosphere, great song building. Like, in terms of the structure of the songs, it definitely lays more on that post-metal sound, like Neurotheistic, Cult of Luna, stuff like that. And there are some songs from Autonoesis and 2 in here that they've reworked and refurbished, or whatever you want to call it. And all of this, I think, is a really solid listen. It's somehow very chill, but also very dense and heavy. And this really showcases a lot of the diversity in this band's sound, like the opening track, Kobe X Pijn, P-I-J-N, I think. Big strings on it, like very lush, very haunting. Truth 2, which is a reworked song from, I believe, 2. Very atmospheric, very groovy, kind of has some like haunting Pink Floyd vibes on it. And events occur in real time. It's probably like the heaviest track in there. Features some harsh vocals, which this band really isn't known for a lot of vocal work. Like generally, I believe a lot of their stuff, it's mostly instrumental. Like they'll have a guest vocal or a collaboration every now and then. But this one showcases some just nasty, harsh screams behind some of the heaviest, sludgiest material on here. There's also a lot of electronic elements, like everything dropping out to electronic beats, waves of synths, and then building back up into giant, droning, sludgy riffs, or even some more like kind of like slow, shoegazy material. For as heavy as it is a very atmospheric listen, and honestly, it doesn't feel like a compilation. Like, it doesn't run like one where it feels like, yeah, these are a collection of odds and ends. They're all produced very similar, so you don't get a lot of like changes in production on it, and it flows, like an album, honestly. While I'd kind of hoped that this was a new album, it kind of flows like one. The songs kind of flow into one another really well. Again, it just doesn't feel like a compilation. It actually feels like a big studio effort. And yeah, I already loved this band going into it. They kind of won me over with the fact that their name is 100% a reference to one of the bounty hunters in Star Wars, which I'm a giant nerd for Star Wars still, so that always kind of wins with me. But yeah, if you're a big fan of Cult of Luna, maybe like Monolord, maybe even Thou at some points, like events occur in real time, is a pretty heavy number, and there's like a little bit of that kind of reminds me of Thou, maybe not as heavy. Either way, check this out, solid release, and I still need to get some more Bossk in my collection, but yeah, good stuff. Lunatic, Uncontrollable Hatred. This is the lone full length from this Illinois-based thrash metal / groove metal act. Came out in 1996, and this was actually sent to me by a fan on the channel, Andy Arenas. He is the drummer of this band, which I believe this band has recently reunited. They broke up, I believe, not too long after this was released. He hit me up on Facebook. We ended up chatting about metal, and he was going to Milwaukee Metal Fest, and I was going to MDF, and I was like, man, I would do both if I could, but that is not a financially responsible decision for me, for damn sure. But yeah, we ended up shooting the shit for a while, and he asked if he could send me, his album from his band from back 1996. I was like, yeah, 100%, man. I'm a 90s kid when it came down to like, getting into metal way back. So I was eager to check this one out, and this is kind of just straightforward groove metal. Like, it says thrash metal on the archives because this band is on the archives, but for the most part, this kind of lands in that groove metal spot. Like there's a lot of stuff in here that reminds me of like Chaos AD, Pantera, Prong, a little bit of Biohazard in there too, because I feel like there's like a little bit of hardcore to it. Heavily syncopated riffs, but again, they're kind of thrashy, but at the same time, like this kind of hangs out in a mid-tempo groove for the most part that does have its faster, thrashier sections like Isolation and Be Damned on here. But for the most part, this really just kind of latches on to that 90s groove metal sound. And honestly, it's kind of a fun throwback because like, if I had heard this in 1996, I would have been like nuts for it. Like this is right in that wheelhouse of stuff that I was listening to back then in my shitty teenager years. And honestly, it probably would have lined up a little bit in my hardcore listening at the time too, because lots of breakdowns on here. Again, the vocals kind of have like a hardcore bite to them. And this doesn't feel like commercial in the slightest. Like this was the kind of groove metal where they were just kind of latching onto the heaviest aspects of it. There weren't any like clean choruses on here that were like big sing-alongs. Like obviously they weren't shooting for any radio nuggets. They just wanted to write some like decidedly more aggressive songs. Admittedly, you know, now this may be a little bit dated, like it's kind of just right on the nose 90s groove metal, but I still enjoy that style, and there's a nostalgic charm to this too. Even within groove metal, I wouldn't say it's like, you know, genre defining or anything like that, but I think it's well executed. Thank you, Andy, for sending me this. I really appreciate that. The sound definitely captures a point in history for me when I was just, you know, a pissed off teenager. And I still have some fond memories of that period in time, despite being a moody shit most of the time. But yeah, this was pretty solid. Straightforward, old school 90s groove metal. Again, if you're a big fan of Pantera, Exporter, Prong, again, Chaos AD era, Sepultura, check this out. Pretty solid stuff. Autonoesis, Moon of Foul Magics. This is the second album from this one-man Canadian blackened thrash / death thrash / I guess like blackened death thrash would probably be an easier way to sum it up. Either way, this was one that I got in the Metalhead box, and pretty much everyone seemed to go nuts when I put up this one. Like, oh my god, this is absolutely amazing. So a lot of hype in the comments going into this. And looking into this, the one member of this band, one Tyler Lidstone, is also the lead guitarist of Slave Agent, which I'll give you one guess which album I'm going to bring up next. But yeah, this album is awesome. Lots of different camps that it pulls from. Like, there's definitely a lot of thrash, there's definitely black metal, and black metal very much in the realm of like Dissection at times, which I'm a big fan of at least 2 Dissection albums. Tons of thrashy hooks and heavy metal harmonies, great lead work. But there's also elements of like melodic death metal, especially melodic death metal that embraces like more folky melodies like early In Flames. The opening track, Exile, I mean, honestly, you could have put that at the beginning of Jessere's Horacle. It would have fit right in. The Conjurer, Valhalla, On Black Wings of Eternity, all of them have these really cool folky atmospheric passages. And then of course it inevitably gets down to just like riffing your face off. And bassline, I feel like I could just say, this is like Canadian Hell Ripper, and I could probably get away with it. The songs are fast-paced, they're aggressive, they are definitely very haunting, especially when it comes down to the vocals. Like they dial up the reverb on there, make them sound particularly cavernous and goblinish. But this has tons of riffs, tons of melody, and tons of dynamics. Like the songs really go all over the place, and they are a little bit on the longer side, so there's a lot of room for dynamics, like just great bridges that are all instrumental, lots of killer harmonies. This guy put a lot of thought into the songs in terms of how they flowed, and you can really just kind of like lose yourself in them. I love the constant give and take between like just rapid fire, thrashy, aggressive riffs, like lots of machine gun riffing, and then cold, blackened tremolos. That balance is just absolutely perfect on here. The only thing that I didn't like on here, I mean, it kind of was the production. Like, and it's mostly down to the drum machine. It's a very thin sounding drum production, and it kind of misses that, you know, aggressive pop that I think it needs, at least for the thrashy sections. Like the more tinny kind of thin sound works with, the black metal side. But when it comes down to the more death thrash sections on here, it kind of needs a little extra oomph, like a little bit more power behind it. But I can overlook, questionable production in favor of just amazing songwriting, and this has absolutely amazing songs in here. Naility, Endless Winter, I think is an absolutely fantastic song. Again, On Black Wings of Eternity. There are moments on there that remind me of like early Opeth, and I'm still an absolute sucker for that. And the thrashy breakdown riffs on the title track and Raise the Dead, absolutely crushing. Like, I love when those like old school, very 80s thrash metal breakdowns hit. Yeah, this whole album rips. You guys were right in the comments. I can definitely see why it was super hyped up. This is awesome. I definitely want to get the first one as well. If you were a big fan of Hellripper in particular, I'd say like Hellripper baseline would kind of cover this, but again, In Flames, Opeth, and definitely like a bit of dissection here. Definitely check this out. This is absolutely killer. Slave Agent, surprise. Silent Universe. This is the second album from this Canadian thrash metal act. I actually got their first one, Alternate Histories, in a Metalhead box years ago, and as soon as I saw the logo, I was like, man, these dudes love Voivod. At least they should, because if they're using that logo style and they don't love Voivod, I feel like there's something wrong here. Luckily, they do love Voivod, and this is definitely more like technical thrash, lots of cool sci-fi themes. Reminds me a lot of Coroner, honestly, especially like those earlier albums, like all the way through like Mental Vortex. Lots of cool angular riffs and wild technical moments on here, but not technical in the sense of wankery, like technical in the sense of like more intricate riffs and just wilder transitions. Tons of melody, tons of great leads on here. Hell, the bass work on here is absolutely amazing. Every bit in terms of like the musicianship, I think is fantastic. And when it comes down to the songwriting, it's really all over the place. Like, of course, you have your flat out thrashy barn burners like Forced to Suffer, Slaughter at the Gate, and The Thresher of Souls. These songs pull no punches. They're fast, they're aggressive, they're still very technical, but a lot of like Slayer and Destruction vibes, especially when you hear that first big wail on Forced to Suffer. Like, it sounds like either Tom Araya or Schmear. Take your pick. The guitar tone itself has like more of like an 80s sizzle. Like, it still sounds a little bit grainy and gritty, not like, super processed. So it definitely captures a very like, 80s sound in terms of thrash metal, but like underground. You also have like more sinister, dark songs like Ripped Into and the closing track Alien Tomb, which is particularly awesome. I really like the blend of sci-fi synths in there, and I think I said something to the effect that this felt like less sci-fi when I did the whole unboxing for the Metalhead box when I got this. And yeah, no, I'm wrong. Like, this is sci-fi as hell. The synth harmonies at the end of Alien Tomb, like, give me some big Nocturnus vibes as well. Like, kind of like The Key, which I still love that album. And I even like the instrumental Dying Worlds, which is very pretty, very lush sounding. It's probably the most tuneful song in here in terms of like just being flat out melodic. It's a nice little breather from all of the just nuts riffs on here, but yeah, the whole thing absolutely rips. And I was a big fan of the first one. I see this one as an improvement. There's a little bit more going on in terms of the song structure, and yeah, the whole vibe, the whole atmosphere, even right down to the production in terms of like capturing a older, kind of grittier sound and thrash. They crushed it. This is a fantastic release from start to finish. Definitely check this out. And also check out their first album too, which I think is really good. But yeah, excellent Canadian thrash metal here. All right, the next two on here are from an artist that has been just sending me a lot of stuff here lately. Puritan Opiate. My friend Jason, who is very prolific here lately. And interestingly enough, the thing that I really like about when he sends me stuff is his projects really don't have like a specific genre from album to album. Like, it can change wildly from song to song, or one album can be themed with one particular sound. But I like his adventurousness in music. But before I show the albums, he's once again sent me another awesome letter. Dear Nick, thanks again for the great and thoughtful review of my last EP. Pretty much as soon as I finished it, I started writing and recording again. And I'm pleased to say that at last I have a full length to share with you titled Neurotheistic. It combines black death doom metal with ambient over the course of a little more than an hour. It's going to release on YouTube and Bandcamp with a free download option on the latter on May 17th. So yeah, this was a while ago. Sorry it took so long to get to it, but you know, tons of stuff going on here. But I wanted you to have this advanced copy. Enjoy. Jason. P.S. At the last minute, I threw in an EP of some straight up dark ambient I've been working on as well. So once again, thank you, Jason, for sending me some more stuff. And, well, here are the albums. Here we have Neurotheistic, and this is the bonus one, which is titled Stark Pestilential Threads. And honestly, Neurotheistic might be my favorite thing that Jason sent me so far. First thing I noted was bigger production. Everything sounds much louder in the mix. The drums are very audible. It does have some spots where it does get a bit quieter, like namely the failure of outward forms. But overall, like, this is probably the best sounding thing he has sent me. And honestly, this is probably the most adventurous one. Like, this really just kind of goes all over the place. Black metal, death metal, doom metal. The ambient synth moments almost kind of make it very post-metal-ish, especially on Small Death in the Red Room. That is a long build-up of a song, but it's really solid. And while the production seems a little bit more muffled on the failure of outward forms, that song has almost like kind of like a noise rock vibe. Like, it reminded me a lot of Today Is the Day with like a touch more of like a black metal or like blackened sludge sort of feel to it. This frequently changes vibes from track to track though, which is, you know, really interesting about this album. The opening track, Our Frail Barks, Founder in Darkness. It almost kind of sounds like avant-garde black metal, like maybe like a little bit of like Imperial Triumphant. I was like, all right, this is definitely a lot to get into, but it's very layered and dense, and because the production's better on it, I can kind of make out all the intricacies on it. But as the album goes on, it really starts opening up, and I really like the synths and the pianos on here. There's creepy, haunting, very almost like depressive atmosphere all over this album, and a lot of it is accentuated by the use of synths and pianos on here, and I think he does a great job. And in terms of just like songwriting flat out, I think this is probably some of his best material too. Most of these songs have just great builds to it, like starting off more, you know, ambient and synthy, and then leading into just hellishly nightmarish soundscapes and riffs. Like, there's some stuff on here that kind of reminds me of like Neurosis, like on like Through Silver and Blood. Now, I will say that one track in here didn't necessarily do it for me. Hollowed-Eyed and Hateful. That song is just sort of strange. Like, there's a very weird drum pattern to it, and then you get this sort of like mix of thrash riffs on top of that, and the song for me just never completely gelled. It's very experimental and odd, but that is kind of the gear of this project. But that one, I just don't think it gelled as much as all the other, you know, fun experimentation on this one. But yeah, baseline, I think this is probably the best thing that you've sent me so far, Jason. So yeah, thank you. Now this one is straight up ambient, like synths and lush soundscapes. And ambient isn't like a thing that I actively pursue in terms of like listening. Like, I don't mind it. Like, it's more background music to me, or, you know, in the case of like other like ambient synth projects, it's something that I can just kind of like nod off to. I don't dislike it, but again, it's not like a style that I just go for, but I like the lush synth work, and both songs are a little bit different. Hiss, Clash, and Hollow Hum, the first track on here, is, you know, a little bit more dark and sinister. Like, it kind of gives that, you know, sci-fi horror sort of vibe throughout it. And yeah, no, it's good. It feels more like, again, like the score to a scene, or, you know, like a short film or something like that. And Serrated Gods starts off very serene sounding. Like, it's just kind of pretty, but there's this like steady hum in the background that continuously gets louder. And it kind of walks this weird balance between something that is very soothing to something that is very unsettling. And it's sort of a give and take in the track. Overall, like, this one kind of wins the day. This is definitely more my thing. This isn't bad, but it's not necessarily my thing overall. But if you're a big ambient fan, I'd recommend checking it out. But of course, as always, I'm going to link all the music down below. I recommend checking them both out. This, I think, is really good. Like, there's some awesome songwriting on it, and I think the production is definitely improved. Check them both out. Once again, thank you, Jason, for sending me some more music. You are a machine here lately, and you've been churning out some quality stuff. But yeah, check them out. Good stuff. Dissected, Golden Hues of Decay. This is the debut full length from this Tiffin, Ohio-based death metal act. I have seen this band multiple times. I even included their first EP in States of Metal for Ohio, which was the first States of Metal I ever did. And I recently saw these guys here in Toledo at Frankie's, and I've been excited to go over this one just because this band absolutely crushes live. Like, they are insanely heavy. And if you were a big fan of like 200 Stab Wounds and like Sanguisugabog and stuff like that, this is right up your alley. This is heavy, groove-laden, old-school death metal with a touch of that like sort of like hardcore bite to it. It's sludgy, it's aggressive, you got blast beats, two-steps, breakdowns. The guitars are insanely dense in here, like thicker than hell, lots of low end, and yeah, this is just flat-out brutal as hell with like really good atmosphere too. Like, lots of creepy horror soundscapes. You know, you even got some like Hellraiser samples. In fact, the opening track, Worms Crawl In, features a fun little song that I used to sing as a kid because I loved scary stories to tell in the dark. In comparison to their EP, I would say there's a little bit more going on, especially in the way of the vocals. Like, there's more vocal shifts, highs to lows. Their frontman has like just a presence about him. If you ever get a chance to see this band live, that dude's kind of a maniac on stage. But every track goes to the throat. There's not a lot of leads, but there's a ton of riffs. This definitely has more of that caveman death metal sort of vibe. Like, this is some knuckle dragon, ooga booga shit, and I'm always down for that. Honestly, every track on here I thought was killer. Lament, Taste of Blood. Patron of the South has got probably one of the nastiest riffs on the entire album. Breakdown in that song is just ferocious. But a big standout in here in terms of like kind of a break from like what they usually do on here is Decomposition by Proxy. A little bit more death doomy, like big droning riffs. It's slower. It's very sluggish. It moves at the pace of like half of a zombie crawling after you. Like, you know, it's just a torso and arms and a head. That song definitely pushes the atmosphere up a little bit too. There's more dark, sinister melodies and dissonant atmosphere and layered screams. The layered screams in there sound extra haunting, and then, you know, it does go really well with the closing track, Worms Crawl Out, which kind of bookends the whole vibe. Yeah, this is a killer album. Like, it's very straightforward. It runs maybe a little bit over a half an hour. Not a lot of surprises, but I wasn't looking for any surprises. I was looking for some like good ooga booga, like groove-laden death metal, and this absolutely just kind of nails that sound. Again, if you're a big fan of Sanguisugabog, 200 Stab Wounds, I'd also say Creeping Death, but, you know, another one that I think is very comparable is Scab Hag too from Cincinnati. Baseline, it's brutal, it's groovy, tons of riffs. If you ever get a chance to see these guys live, I strongly recommend it. Killer band. Just check this out. It's good. Bat, Under the Crooked Claw. This is the second album from this Virginia-based speed/heavy metal act. Features Ryan Waste and Nick Polos of Municipal Waste. And Ryan Waste is actually doing bass and vocals on here. No guitar for him this time. But Nick Polos is a solid guitarist. He's been in Municipal Waste for a while. That dude can flat out shred. And this is just flat out throwback 80s speed metal / heavy metal. It's very Venom inspired. Like, it's dark, sinister, snarly. Tons of D beats and just riffs and melodies, but with like a punky sort of like snarl to it. Like, Ryan Waste's vocals, he's not doing like a lot of singing. In fact, it's more of like a hardcore sort of like yell. And honestly, I kind of like it. Like, it gives it sort of a Midnight-ish sort of vibe. And much like Midnight, this band embraces Camp by the truckloads. Like, it's kind of silly and over top. The lyrics are pretty ridiculous, a little on the dumb side, but I mean, it's an endearing sort of dumb. It's the kind of dumb I expected because, well, I mean, like all of Municipal Waste side projects, they're all kind of a little silly in a way, but they're all pretty damn good. I think it was Street Banger in particular. There's a lyric in there, I think it's in the chorus, that says like, we are the ones that hold the key, but the way I kept hearing it was, we are the ones that hold our pee. I mean, one's just a good heavy metal trope because we've heard about keys and gates and all that stuff in heavy metal before, but holding your pee, I think that's noble depending on the situation you're in. Like, yeah, you don't want to miss the band that's on, you gotta pee. Like, no, I can pee after the set. That's a fan right there. A lot of it is very upbeat, like lots of major chords and good harmonies, but there's some like heavier tracks in there that pack a little bit more of a mean punch, like Warshock in particular. Battered is a little bit on the heavier side too. Overall, it's a fun album. It kind of blows by very quickly. All the songs are catchy. They are quite a bit similar, but it's one of those albums you just kind of put on from front to back and just sort of enjoy the ride because it's silly, retro, old school heavy metal, and I still really dig that. It's kind of the same aesthetic as like pizza thrash. You order pizza, you get some beers, watch some horror movies, you can put this on, you can put on Municipal Waste. It's almost the same vibe, except, you know, maybe with this, less furniture gets broken. But overall, yeah, if you're a big fan of Midnight, Motorhead, Venom, Toxic Holocaust to a degree, I'd say check this out. It's just a straight up fun album. It's nothing really new, but it is entertaining, and ultimately that is kind of just the thing that I want from bands like this. So yeah, check it out. Tzompantli, Beating the Drums of Ancestral Force. This is the second album from this California-based Mesoamerican themed Death Doom act. I was a big fan of their first album, which I don't even know how to pronounce the title of that album, which will be a theme because I don't know how to pronounce the name of a single track on here, which, yeah, it's all in like Mesoamerican, and it's almost as difficult as like Finnish, which that'll be a theme a little bit later. Now this is one I definitely wanted to go over, but we just didn't have time to do a full-on review. But yeah, I've had this for a while. I've been listening to this for a while, and yeah, this thing is an absolute monster. Now, initially this started off as a two-man project, and I guess in between albums, this thing really grew because now they have 10 members, or, you know, it's maybe more of a collaborative effort because you have members of Teeth, Zabalba, Sybaris, and even crossover Thrashers, Dead Heat on here now. And man, this is just an even bigger album. I mean, naturally, you had that many members and that many collaborators on there, it should be big, but this one brings in more of the like cultural elements, the death whistles, chanted vocals, extra percussion, but man, does this thing just slam into you with just crushing riff after riff. The opening track, oh, we'll take a stab at it. Huete? I don't know. Actually kind of comes in with blast beats, which was a thing that really wasn't on the first one. I was like, okay, this is almost kind of like Nihilish because it's, you know, very fast paced. It's also very huge sounding, and then it settles into the lumbering syncopated grooves and the just heavy cavernous vocals. And that is more of the gear of this album, but it is done with even more flair this time. Again, lots of extra percussion, vocal trade-offs. You have rhythmic chanting, which I think is cool. I mean, it's definitely part of the whole like cultural vibes in here, but it honestly sounds flat out creepy as hell too. A lot of these tracks are either very slow or more mid-tempo. Like that's kind of like the fastest pace it gets outside of like a couple of sections of blast beats. The mid-tempo sections on here, honestly, if you're a big fan of Frozen Souls Crypt to Ice, like you're gonna recognize that groove. It's kind of got like that bolt thrower sort of chug to it, but there are some songs in here that get flat out slow, and I'm talking like funeral doom slow. That namely shows up in the closing track, Ik no Kui Kato? Maybe that was wrong or right? I don't know. All these songs are like word jumbles, but that song, slower, more brooding, and I really like the trade-offs in the vocals. Like there's like some more like kind of groaned cleans on there too. And while I think the additional vocals are definitely a big dynamic on here that pushes this a little bit past the debut, the tribal drum sections will always bring me back. I love tribal drums in general, and they work so well here. And it's cool hearing, again, a band that has a very specific theme in general, and they incorporate it in the music really well. And there's nothing in here where I'd say it kind of collides, like they try to force in too many cultural elements to, you know, make it sound a little bit different, and kind of got away from just being flat out disgustingly heavy. Every track on here is ridiculously heavy, but they're also, again, very rich with all these cool cultural elements that make them stand out. Any one of these tracks, there are generally just huge syncopated breakdowns that just instantly bring that stank face curl to your lip when you hear like, oh, dude, that is filthy. I think this might be better than the debut album, and the debut album was close to being a year ender for me. I was absolutely blown away by it. This, I think, expands their sound, and in some fashion, I think it's even heavier than that absolute beast of a debut, too. If you're a big fan of, I mean, oh god, dude, like Zabalba, I think is pretty damn close, even though it's a little bit more hardcore oriented. I'd say Gatecreeper too, at least like earlier Gatecreeper. I mean, pretty much just like the filthiest, slowest, gnarliest sounding death doom you can imagine. It's this. Check this out. This album is amazing. Could be a year ender. I don't know. I'm gonna spend a lot more time with it, but yeah, check this out. Korpsesoturi, Malice Corpus. This is the debut album from this Finnish death metal band, and this was one sent to me, again, by Metal Viking 82. He's been sending me a lot of cool stuff here lately in terms of like just extras and clearing out his collection, and since I don't really clear out my collection, I just hoard music like some psychopath. That works out really well for me. What doesn't work out well for me is this is back-to-back albums with songs that I can't say because they're in a different language, because every single track in here is in Finnish. And to me, Finnish is like almost the equivalent of like, you know, analyzing a trigonometry problem. Like my brain just can't. So forgive me if I don't bring up track names just because, I don't really think I can. But I will say that flat out, this is like the Finnish equivalent of Bloodbath. Leaning way more on the HM2 Swedish style. It's crispy, it's raw, like this doesn't kind of have like that more like Finnish death doom sound you would hear in like early Amorphous and Sentence and so on. The opening track, and I mean, here's another reason why I'm not doing it. They put it in the old English font, so it's more confusing. Whatever it is, opens up with what sounds like just a creepy girl saying stuff in Finnish, and legit, she could be saying anything. She could be reading off her homework problems or reading her mom's grocery list, and it still would be absolutely creepy and unsettling. And then the song just opens up into HM2 snarl, blast beats, some solid grooves, and right down to the vocals. The vocals almost have like a Ockerfeltian sort of sound to them. Like this sounds like Fathomless Mastery or the Blessing the Purity EP. Like it's very similar to that era of Bloodbath in particular. Cadence-wise, I would say this singer is a little bit different in the fact that the vocals are a little bit more fast-paced and his phrasing feels just a little bit more on the brutal side. But musically, I would say it is on par. There are moments that get a little bit more grindy, a little bit more blasty, but lots of deep tremolos, lots of just chuggy, you know, groovy sections. One of these tracks that I can say actually even has some like really blackened elements, and it kind of alternates between like blackened tremolos to like just flat out like death metal machine gun guitars. This thing is just vicious from start to finish, and I think I'm gonna be hunting down more of their stuff, which I assume probably will all be in Finnish as well. The only issue I had was the last track, which, yeah, no, I'm not even gonna try it. There is a long period of silence at the end. Like, they just didn't cut off the mix there, and it just kind of goes on. Maybe it's a moment of silence as a tribute to someone. Maybe that was a spot where there was supposed to be like an atmospheric lead out. Maybe there's like a hidden message in Finnish that I wouldn't understand anyway. I don't know, but it was there and I was like, that's just sort of odd. But outside of that, this album is fantastic. If you were a big Bloodbath fan, and I'd even throw in like Dismember, Entombed, you know, the usual suspects when it comes down to HM2 glory. Check this out. Pretty interesting listen considering I was expecting something more along the lines of just, you know, flat out Finnish death metal, which again is a little bit more doom laden and a little bit more morbid angel-y. But instead I got something that's just flat out Bloodbath worship, and I dig the hell out of it. I mean, that's kind of an easy one for me. Once again, thank you, Metal Viking 82, for sending me some more cool stuff. And yeah, if you get any more extras lying around, I will gladly take them off your hands. But yeah, check this out. This is an absolutely nasty album. Evildead, Toxic Grace. This is the fourth album from these old school LA Thrashers, their second one since reforming, I think a little bit before 2020. I'm a huge fan of their debut album, Annihilation of Civilization. I think that's an underrated gem in the entire LA thrash metal scene. And their comeback album, United States of Anarchy, I thought was pretty solid. Like, it was just a good re-establishing album, a lot of energy. I wasn't like the biggest fan of like the production, but overall it sounded like they were kind of like trying to recapture that old school vibe again. And yeah, I saw that this was coming out. I saw the album cover and I was like, oh boy, we're probably going to hear people complaining about wokeness. And yeah, they use the word woke, which I still have no idea what the hell that means, but it's on here. But yeah, this album is not as good as the last one. It's still got like some good thrashy barn burners, a lot of energy to it. Like the last track, Fear Porn, which is just a weird name for a song. It's very energetic. Honestly, it's got some of the best riffs on the album. But a lot of these songs, I feel like they kind of just lost the energy and the momentum that they had on the last one. And this one just feels more unfocused, at least in terms of the music, and maybe more focused on the social commentary, I guess they're trying to make. Riff-wise, I think that's where a lot of the energy comes out. Reverie, Subjugated Souls, I think, you know, good, solid, thrashy riffs, they're hooky. But I think for the most part, like, a lot of these songs, they just feel lax, and a big part of that, I think, is the vocals. The vocals, I feel like there's like some, you know, grit lost in the vocals. They feel like they're mostly spoken and they're not very punchy. Thrash metal for me, like, it's got to have like a bit of that snarl when it comes on the vocals. Like, they have to sound gritty, they have to sound mean, they have to sound hostile. And a lot of these vocals, I don't know, they just feel kind of like lax, like, you know, like, you're kind of angry. And when you're doing a style of music that does rely on like some good chorus hooks, if the energy is not there, then that hook kind of doesn't really land. But one of my main issues in here is, man, this album is kind of cringy. To me, this almost sounds like Fox News thrash. Like, this is like the house band for the RNC, and yeah, for most people that know me, I'm not one for conservative politics whatsoever. Most of the culture war stuff that they do is just incessant whining, and that is unfortunately a good chunk of this, and it really kind of dulls the impact of the songs. It kind of makes them silly. Like songs about bitching about being on social media, while, you know, I know this band is on social media and some platforms, you know, I don't know, it feels a little hypocritical. And people still complaining about, remember that time I had to wear a mask over my face? It was the most horrible thing I've ever been subjected to. We were being stripped of our freedoms just because they didn't want us to like spread a contagious virus. I swear they should just change the "don't tread on me, snake" to "don't mildly inconvenience me, otherwise I will complain on the internet." Musically, I think if this was better, I could probably overlook that. You know, I listened to Megadeth still, and Dave's still whining about stuff that he's whining about, but he still generates good riffs, good hooks. This album is, you know, kind of missing that for the most part. Like, there's a couple of standouts on here, but the overall vibe on here, I feel like I ordered Exodus from Wish, and this is what I got. Like, this really feels like kind of a watered down version of their former selves. And again, their comeback album I thought was really solid. It had energy, it had punch. This feels like they wrote an album. The riffs kind of end up getting stale at certain points, and some of the songs just go nowhere. And again, vocals, I just feel like there's like no power behind them. But that's just me. I encourage you to still check this one out. I mean, check out their last one too. I still really dig this band, but it's mainly their earlier stuff. Like, their first album is so damn good. And, you know, the second one I think is pretty solid in itself, though not nearly as good as the debut. But for me, I'd see this one as a bit of a misstep. But either way, check it out, form your own opinions. Who knows, you might absolutely love it, but you won't know until you actually listen to it. So, check it out. Marty Freeman, Drama. This is, I believe, the 18th solo album from Marty Freeman. Guitar wizard, genius. His guitar playing is tighter than his spiral curls. I have been a huge fan of him ever since Rust in Peace, and my fandom continues even though I don't have a lot of his solo albums, because, man, there's a lot of them. Flat out, I got this simply because it said Marty Freeman on it. There's Marty Freeman on the cover. That's enough for me. And I really didn't look into this album going into it, and maybe I should have, but at the same time, I still enjoyed this for what it was. This is more about composition and writing, like, I would say, like, film scores. Like, I think that was the big inspiration behind this. I would not call this a metal album at all. The song Thrill City might be the most metallic sounding song on there, but it's still very upbeat. It's very lavish. There's lots of different elements blended in with, Marty's amazing guitar playing. The opening track, Illumination, it almost sounds like a lavish Queen song. Like there's pianos, there's of course brilliant guitar play interweaving with the piano harmonies. It gets very neoclassical at a point. There's a huge crescendo. Again, it sounds like the scores to movies. In fact, the song Triumph on here honestly kind of reminded me of The Princess Bride. Like it's a lot of soft acoustic play, like kind of classical acoustic guitar, and it's just very pretty. Musically across the board, even though most of this is not very metal at all, I just flat out love the playing. Like he just knows how to write songs. In fact, Marty Freeman needs to score Hallmark movies at least, because that would actually make them watchable, because those movies are absolute trash. But they could have one redeeming thing about them, that Marty Freeman scored their movie and then hopefully moved on to bigger and better things than a Hallmark movie. Now there are a couple of tracks with vocals on them. Two Rebeldes, oh, it's Spanish vocal. Okay, that makes sense why that just doesn't say Two Rebels. And Dead of Winter. And, well, I'll be honest, they're two of my least favorite tracks in here, especially Dead of Winter. I don't remember the vocalist that he had in here, and I could probably open this up and just look him up, but I'm not gonna, because I didn't like the vocals at all. It's just kind of like your standard, heavy rock vocals, like they could be in any band that's been around since 2000 or whatever. I like when the focus is on the music and the song construction, and the vocals were just this kind of butt rockish distraction. They're just kind of there. I don't think he's a bad singer, but it's just not a vocal style that I really want to listen to. And the Spanish vocals I thought were cool, but at the same time, I kind of didn't want any vocals on here, because at least the Marty albums that I own are all instrumental, and I absolutely love them. But yeah, outside of that, I will say that this isn't something I would normally listen to, but this is something that I really appreciated just for the songwriting. And once again, Marty Freeman is just an amazing guitar player and songwriter. So yeah, that's kind of enough for me to justify buying it. And it's good hearing him branch out and do some different stuff with the solo work too. But yeah, God, I don't know, if you're a big fan of film scores that should include Marty Freeman's guitar work, I don't know how to really sell this one. It definitely has a cinematic quality, but I mean, it's still one of those you can sit back and listen to and just marvel at this man's playing. Check it out. It's an interesting listen. Probably, again, not something I would revisit as much as I would revisit some of his other albums, but still pretty good. So yeah, check it out. Hell Butcher, self-titled. This is the debut album from, Hell Butcher's new project, or his solo effort. This is, of course, the legendary frontman of Niflheim. So really not sure if he's billing this as his, solo album with, a backing band, or Hell Butcher is the name of the band now too. It's confusing, but what's not confusing is the fact that this album is just flat out fun. This is black metal / blackened thrash / blackened speed metal. It's riffy, it's fun, it's high octane. This does not skimp on one bit of energy. And he got some seriously talented musicians to help him out. On drums you have Martin Axelrod, formerly of Opeth, currently still in Bloodbath. That dude is an amazing drummer. And I believe on lead guitar, he has Frederick Folkhair of Unleashed, and that dude is an absolutely amazing guitarist as well. And man, this album is just flat out fun. It's catchy, it's kind of sleazy. I love the snarled vocals. Hell Butcher himself does a great job delivering just, sinister sounding vocals, but there's also that element of just fun campiness to it. The production's very crisp, but it's still gritty. The guitars absolutely snarl, and this album moves at Mach 10. It really doesn't slow down, and it's only a little over a half an hour long, so you can just blaze through this and then just start it again. And I would say that's just going to be a good idea anyway, especially if you want to get stuff done. This is going to motivate you. You could clean your house with this or perform human sacrifices. Your choice. One of them is highly more illegal. Either way, you'll get them done, because this album just kind of thrives on energy and just adrenaline. And I love how it flips from sinister to just flat out tuneful and catchy. There's a lot of just great lead play on here. The 3-track run of Death's Rider, Possessed by the Devil's Flames, and Satan's Power is one of the best runs of tracks on this album. Every one of those songs rips for different reasons. Death's Rider, I mean, it sounds like extra Black into Midnight, which, yeah, sign me up. That's a pretty easy one for me. Pretty much this thing's just a flat-out blast. It's just an enjoyable listen. If you love riffs, speed, melody, and just a nice dash of campy evil, I strongly recommend checking it out. This was just a ton of fun. Check it out. Cult of Luna, self-titled. This is the self-titled debut album from this Swedish post-metal act, maybe sludge / post-metal at this point. This is the only Cult of Luna album that I was missing as far as the full lengths, and I was stoked to actually find it. And yeah, this kind of goes back to their earlier days, like kind of the very start. And this was back when the band definitely had a more sludge influence. They hadn't really hit that kind of more like lavish, expansive sound. It definitely has like its post-metal elements enough to make this like a post-metal album, but it's way more focused on the sludge and the drone and the heaviness. This is also back in the Klaus era in terms of the vocals, where they definitely had more of a raw sort of like, you know, desperate groan and growl to him. Not a huge departure from where they are now in terms of vocals, but I think he had like just sort of a different quality. Like they felt a little bit more like raspy. But I will say that this album definitely feels more like Neurosis worship versus like their later albums. Like, I mean, Neurosis is definitely a big part of their sound, but this one feels almost like their attempt at like, you know, emulating Through Silver and Blood in particular. It's very harsh, heavy, dense. It doesn't have a lot of the more melodic aspects of their later work on here. Like this is just sort of a vicious but slow kind of brooding listen. Hollow and To Be Remembered are definitely more like aggressive cuts on here. They're sludgy, they're kind of dark and sinister. They don't really mill about as much with the atmosphere, but I mean, there's still definitely some atmosphere. The keyboards on here are a lot different than they are now. I would say like there are points in here where I feel like their keyboardist was channeling a little bit of John Lord. To Be Remembered in particular was that kind of big moment to me where they're kind of like droning Hammond organs, but there's a lot of other additional elements on here too. Sleep has strings on it. It's more of a ghostly, haunting dirge of a start as it builds into the heavier sections of the song. And those atmospheric breaks are kind of nice when it comes down to the vicious levels of just heaviness on here. Like this is way more coarse and harsh sounding than a lot of their later work. And maybe like a little bit riffier too. Like The Sacrifice actually has some like just flat out sludge riffs on it. And a lot of their stuff is more about like layered melodies. Like there's still riffs, but for the most part, it's more about the atmosphere and how sort of airy it is, but at the same time kind of dense. And this one kind of gets more towards the dense. Like everything in here is thick, it's coarse, it's abrasive. There's noisy outros on a fair amount of the tracks. There's still a fair amount of melody on here, but I don't think that was the main concern in here. I think they were trying to, you know, make a sonic assault of an album, and for the most part, I think it really works. I do think that they got better as they went on, though. Like, you know, this is a good start, but I mean, even with the next album, I saw a lot of improvements. But yeah, I'm just stoked to finally have this one in my collection. I've been wanting to complete this discography for a long time, just because, I mean, as far as like post-metal goes, this is one of my favorite bands in that subgenre. If you've never checked this out, check it out. It's a strong debut. Again, a lot different than a lot of their later stuff, but I mean, if you want to hear mostly their heavier side, I would say this one and the follow-up. I'd also say that if you're a big Neurosis fan and you've never jammed this album, you're going to find a lot of similarities too. So yeah, check it out. Nuclear Tomb, Terror Labyrinthian. This is the first full-length from this Baltimore progressive death thrash act. They actually played at MDF, but I missed them because they were at Angel's Rock Bar, and I only stopped in there once, and man, you can't really fit that many people in there. And I'll be honest, the stage was just really hard to see, but I really wanted to check these guys out at some point because I'd heard a lot of really good things. And yeah, this is just flat out vicious, twisting, angular riffs everywhere. Like this kind of reminds me a bit of that Dissimulator release that came out earlier this year on 20 Bucks Spin. Maybe not as like geared towards like Watchtower and Voivod as that album, but kind of close. Like I could definitely make the same comparisons with Coroner, like lots of more like intricate riffs, but there's also a lot of like really interesting rhythmic patterns in terms of like the drums, the bass, like very akin to Atheist as well. This album is just kind of bonkers, like really sharp transitions, blazing lead work. The guitar work in general is just nuts. And I like that this sounds a little bit more raw, like the production here is notably a bit grittier sounding, and it kind of gives it like the live performance value, like it's not too polished and too pristine to the point where it just kind of comes across as like maybe just like a little too clean for its own good. Like this is still thrash metal, and I mean kind of death thrash, so it's got to be a bit grimy. As crazy and as technical as this gets, there's still tons of good riffy breakdowns, especially in Fatal Visions, Dominance and Persecution, which has a really awesome, like more sinister kind of clean build-up. Like it's way more atmospheric, and then it just gets down to these absolutely just killer riffs. There's a lot of cool dynamics in here that actually keep this album very fresh going from track to track. Like it really doesn't stay in one particular gear too long. Like Vile Humanity, flat out D-beat ripper. It's a little bit more simplified, I guess. I mean, it still, of course, has its technical moments, but compared to other tracks, it's more about the energy. But then following that, you have Manufactured Consent and Parasitic, Live a Lie, which are notably more death metal leaning. Like the thrash metal elements are kind of pushed back in favor of like some more flat out just death metal aggressive riffs. And Born in a Torment is notably more slow and sludgy. There's some really gross lurching riffs on there that are kind of standouts. Like they really don't sound like anything else on the album, and some really interesting bass effects on there. Like there's just some weird filters they're playing with to make it sound more creepy and weird. This is awesome, and I'm kind of bummed that I missed the band at MDF, but at the same time, I don't know who I would have had to have missed to have seen this band. So, you know, sacrifices have to be made sometime, but I'm glad I snagged this. This is an absolutely awesome album. If you're a big fan, again, of like Dissimulator, that new Dissimulator album on 20 Buck Spin, very similar to that, but also Coroner, Atheist, maybe a little bit of Voivod in here, especially like early Voivod, like Killing Technology. I definitely got some vibes of that here. Check this out, solid album. Strife, Incision. This is their most recent EP, and it came out nearly 10 years ago. I have a long history with this California-based hardcore act. One of my favorite hardcore releases ever is their second album, In This Defiance. It pretty much set me on the path of hardcore, and definitely Victory Records, because I bought a ton of stuff on Victory Records. So yeah, pretty much when I see Strife, I'm instantly like, ooh, I have to check this out and see if there's, you know, stuff I don't have on this. And this is an EP worth of fresh songs. Well, like fresh 10 years ago, and I mean, it's all right. It really doesn't have the same energy as Witness or Rebirth, which I see as like a really solid comeback album for them. A lot of it is a little bit more groove laden. I think the production's kind of subdued. I do like the fact that we get some Ohio hardcore / metallic hardcore veterans on the title track in here, with Human Furnace from Ringworm and Aaron Melnick, formerly of Integrity. It's good to see some Ohio hardcore get represented. And that song is definitely one of the heavier tracks, features more double bass, it definitely has more of that metallic hardcore sound overall. And while Revelations gets a little bit more up-tempo, kind of brings in the D-beats, a lot of this just kind of feels like, I don't know, a little flat. Like it doesn't quite pack that same punch that, you know, a lot of their earlier releases have. I don't think it's necessarily bad, it's just sort of missing a bit of energy. I do like the cover of Police Story. I mean, you know, Black Flag covers are always welcome here, and they do a solid job, but yeah, it's a 10-minute EP. It kind of just scratches the surface, which I'm definitely making a reference to Sick of It All there. But yeah, no, I feel like it just doesn't quite fully get going, and by the time it's over, you know, you're like, well, that was okay. Again, not bad, but I mean, this band has definitely done a lot better. But yeah, if you're an old school hardcore fan and you just want a quick 10-minute listen, check this out. If you haven't listened to Witness or Rebirth, their big comeback album from, was that 2010, 2012? Check that one out. If you've never checked out In This Defiance, that album is flat out amazing. Again, like one of my favorite hardcore albums ever, or metallic hardcore, maybe to be more specific. Check this out. Just check out some Strife. I still think this band's awesome, and hopefully they're working on something new that has just that old school punch again. But yeah, this was, okay. Gestation, Sentient Tumor. This is the first full length from this Arizona-based Gore Grind act, and one of the cool little treats that Headsplit Records sent us once again, because they're always good about sending us crazy, just gnarly stuff. And yeah, no, this is exactly that. Now, early on when Headsplit was actually just first starting to send us stuff, they sent us a copy of their first EP, Suffering from the Start, which was just absolutely filthy. And this is kind of a continuation of that, possibly even filthier. Like, it is just murky and muddy and gross, like across the board. In fact, this sounds almost like a live recording that was just kind of done on a terrible tape deck or something like that. But that kind of works with this band's aesthetic. This is just rotten old school gore grind, like recaputrefaction style, just filthiness. But I will say that it's riffy as hell. Like, this isn't just a mess of blast beats and pukes and gurgles and just, you know, all the standard grossness you get out of Gore Grind. There are some solid grooves, solid riffs on here. It's very primal, very gross. Again, the production's something else. The bass is like super overdriven and sizzly as hell, and the guitars are just pure murky goop. And interestingly enough, the snare is kind of like all over the place. Occasionally some songs it has a little bit more of that pingy kind of like piccolo snare sound, and sometimes it's just like a good meaty thwack. Either way, it's gunky and grimy and filthy. And of course, one of my favorite things about Gore Grind are the song titles. Now, honestly, there's a lot of like solid songs in here. Most of them like a little bit over a minute. I think there's one that it might approach 2 minutes. And there are quite a number of songs that are under a minute, like Nailgun Torture, Turbo Winter, Stew Maker, and the last track simply titled Dead, Dead, Dead. And those are like kind of like the tamer song titles, but I mean, some of these song titles are absolutely amazing. I mean, some of my personal favorites, Meat World, I think that one's just hilarious. Testicle Noose, Bone Explosion, Not Enough Organs, but I mean, the personal favorite, just because it's it's so fucked up, Orphan Crippler, which I saw that, I instantly started laughing. I was like, dude, kids got it bad enough. And you're like, oh, parents are dead? Fuck your legs. Like, the more I thought about it, I thought it could have been like a tribute song to Bane after he broke Batman's back, because I mean, you could have called him Orphan Crippler at that point. That might have been his nickname going around Arkham Asylum, and it would have been accurate as fuck. But seriously though, while Gore Grind is, you know, kind of hit or miss with me, I found this one to be like pretty damn fun. As murky as it is, it's surprisingly listenable, and again, it's got good riffs, good solid grooves that pop up. Again, you gotta pay attention because the songs are like super short, and I think this only tracks about maybe 27 minutes over the course of 21 songs. But yeah, this is just sort of like rotten, filthy, gross fun. And I mean, if you're a big fan, again, of like recaputrefaction, I'd say Organ Failure is kind of comparable to this, like the band, not the actual failure of organs. Hemorrhage, to a degree, too. I don't know, if you're a Gore Grind fan, I'm reasonably sure you're gonna find some stuff that you dig on here. This, I thought, was pretty damn fun. I love the almost sort of thing-ish artwork on here, too. Yeah, this revels in being over the top and gross, and I mean, that's what Gore Grind should be. So yeah, check it out. Roanoke, Ancestral Tunes. This is the second album from this Seattle-based sludge/doom metal act. This is another one that Headsplit sent us, completely far removed from gestation here. And honestly, I had never heard of this band before. I like fresh listens, and the album cover was putting off some serious Lovecraftian vibes, so I was already interested. And yeah, this is slow and murky. Like, honestly, the doom aspect is funeral doom, flat out. This moves at the pace of like esoteric funeral, maybe skepticism. I don't know. This might be slower than skepticism. The guitar tone on here is thicker than hell. Immediately kind of stankified my face on the first riff. Like, it's just gross. Everything lumbers and crawls like it's kind of wading its way through cement. The vocals are cavernous and rotten sounding. It just has this very spooky kind of damp atmosphere to it. Honestly, maybe early Ahab is a good comparison. Like, it has kind of a vibe like Call the Wretched Sea too. It does pick up a little bit, especially on the last track, Lords of Change, which has some really cool harmonized riffs. It's still gloomy and morose sounding, but it immediately slows back down like, whoa, hold on, we almost got out of our main gear here. Time to harness these songs and kind of reel them in a bit and slow them down. I would say that this has more of the Funeral Doom sound overall than it does sludge. Like the guitar tone has definitely got like a little bit of that sludgy, gross sizzle to it, but I don't know, like flat out I would just call this Funeral Doom. Like there isn't a lot of like those like, I guess you could say like more southern tinges you would get in like, you know, NOLA bands like I Hate God or anything like that. Like this is more about just suffocating you in just huge riffs, and I dug every track on here. While they are kind of similar, it's kind of like the whole vibe of the album, like it feels like it's just like slowly squashing you, and I mean, I kind of like that in my Doom. In terms of like sludge bands, I can't really think of one that I could flat out recommend that sounds like this. You know, maybe some of the more slow droning sections of Thou, but for the most part, I'd say Ahab, Funeral, Esoteric, stuff like that. The really, really, really slow stuff. The songs aren't quite as long as an Esoteric song or a Funeral song. Like, you know, it's mostly about the pace, the length of the song. Like, I think there's one on here over 10 minutes, but the entire runtime of this is maybe like a little bit over 40 minutes, so it's not super long, even though there's only 4 tracks. But yeah, check this out. I definitely want to check out their first album after this one. Yet another cool, gross, heavy thing that Headsplit has introduced us to. So once again, thank you to those guys for sending us more stuff. And yeah, looking forward to more surprise packages showed up at my doorstep in the future because you guys are absolutely awesome. So check out this band, check out Headsplit Records. Great stuff. Casket Robbery, Rituals of Death. This is the second album from this Wisconsin death metal / brutal death metal act. Another band that I recently saw. We went to our Toledo Death Fest and they were one of the headlining bands. And honestly, I feel like I've kind of slept on this band because I thought they were something else versus being a absolutely brutal as hell death metal act. I might have had them confused with another band, but I kind of looked at the logo and was like, that doesn't really scream death metal. But they completely won me over live. Their performance was honestly probably one of the best of that fest. I mean, we ended up leaving not too long after that. But their sound is brutal as hell, lots of blast beats, very Decapitated-esque in terms of the syncopation. Like it's just very tight, very rhythmic, lots of like heavy triplet chugging, and lots of good groovy breakdowns. And one of the main things that I loved about their performance was their front woman, Megan. First off, she is unbelievably sweet, like super kind. She reinforces a lot of Midwestern stereotypes about us, you know, just being cheesy and nice. And while her performance is just visceral, like she's growling her guts out, in between every song, she was just like the sweetest person. And with the Wisconsin accent in there, I was just waiting for a like, you betcha to slip out. She was super cool. She engaged the crowd well, and she was awesome to talk to when we got a chance to buy merch, which, you know, I ended up buying this. But it was like the switch got flipped. Like, it was like, all right, I'm done talking now. I'm gonna have to start growling. And then she would just go to town. And her delivery, I think, is really cool because it's not a standard, like, brutal death metal growl. Like, she's not doing super, super low gutturals. It's almost more of like this kind of violent, hardcore kind of growl to it with like just a little bit more grit to it. And it works, like, flat out. She has a powerful presence on this album and a powerful presence live. I will say that the front half of this feels way more like death metal centric, like it's just blasty and riffy as hell. And as it goes on, it gets a little bit more towards like the groovy side. Postmortem, Bone Mother, The Hidden, The Hideous, old ones are definitely more groove laden. There's a lot more in the way of breakdowns, and this is where the atmosphere really kind of takes off, especially on Postmortem. The samples in there are pretty nasty. I don't know if it's Megan doing the samples or it's from a movie, but there's a whole segment about someone peeling the flesh off of someone and commenting, it's like, oh, your skin comes off so easy. Pretty unsettling and gross because you get all the wet, sticky, kind of slimy noises in there too. And then as the album goes on, you start hearing a lot more synths and like kind of like textured vocals. I liked it, but at a certain point, I think they kind of like took over a little bit too much in certain songs. Like Reanimate in particular, I think the synths sound a little too like industrial, kind of techno-y, and it kind of takes away from the flat out brutality of the song. Like those two styles kind of end up colliding there. But outside of that, I think this album flat out rips, and it's kind of a surprise. Again, I probably had them confused with another band, but I wasn't sure like if this was like an industrial or nu metal-ish band, and I was like, you know what? I've heard a lot of people say a lot of good things about this band, plus their drummer also plays in another band that I saw that was just flat out black metal, and dude's beast of a drummer. But we checked them out, completely won us over, super cool people. And yeah, if you're a big fan of, again, like Decapitated, I would even say like a little bit of Black Dahlia Murder in here too. But I mean, baseline just tight, vicious, modern death metal, maybe like a little bit of brutal death metal in there too. I don't know, it's just good. I recommend checking it out. I definitely want to find more by this band, and looking forward to any future releases from them too as well. So yeah, check this band out and check them out live. And if you see them live too, talk to them. They're like just super awesome people. And finally, we have Municipal Waste, Tango and Thrash EP. Now, I believe this is a reissue of, well, I think it started off as a split that they did with Bad Acid Trip years ago, and then I think they re-released it on its own, maybe as like a compilation. Either way, it's being re-released again. It says Municipal Waste on it. I'm gonna buy it. I mean, that and the fact that it is predominantly all themed after Kurt Russell movies, which is fantastic. This EP is a little bit over 9 minutes long, and there are 9 tracks on it. So every single song in here is short and explosive and kind of captures a lot of their earlier material, like around Waste 'Em All. Kind of a different vibe back then. Even Tony Foresta sounds like notably different. Like he hadn't found that like raspy belting sort of vocal style that he got a little bit later on in like Hazardous Mutation. But this is just flat out fun. Like the opening track in here, which is titled Escape from New York, but features a sample from Big Trouble in Little China about, you know, old Jack Burton and the Pork Chop Express. I have to love that. I've seen those movies so many damn times, and I would definitely say for a while that Kurt Russell was John Carpenter's muse. And I mean, he did some of like his best work with Kurt Russell at the helm, like The Thing. That's like God tier movie right there. There's also some fun samples from Tango and Cash, because you can't title this Tango and Thrash without at least sampling that movie a little bit. But yeah, the originals on here, very short. You know, they're straight to the point. A lot of like very old crossover vibes. Like it doesn't quite have like the more modern sound I guess they have, or modern-ish. Like, I mean, their sound is pretty old school, but this kind of goes back to like early DRI, early Cryptic Slaughter, and then when you get down to the covers on here, you have 2 covers from 2 different albums by Corrosion Conformity, both from Animosity and Eye for an Eye, and you have a Poison Idea cover. So they went completely old school with those covers. I don't know if those were originally on the original release, but they do sound like they were recorded in that era, because they still have that flat out, just gnarly sound. But their covers of Minds Are Controlled and Intervention are flat out awesome. Animosity is, oh man, like, because I love a lot of eras of CSE, but Animosity is like one of my favorites because I love crossover thrash. And their cover of Poison Idea, Self-Abuse, is vicious as hell too. I wouldn't call this the most necessary Municipal Waste release. Like, you know, this is like just solid and like maybe for collectors only. But if you're a giant fan of crossover thrash and you love the goofy, over-the-top stuff and just what, well, Municipal Waste does, then I would say get it. From what I gather, the original one is kind of hard to find. So, you know, this is just like kind of a good substitute. Plus, you know, killer artwork, Pork Chop Express right there in the back too. Yeah, this is just flat out fun. If you love crossover thrash, Municipal Waste, Kurt Russell movies, all 3 of those, I'd just say check it out because it's just a blast. So yeah, good stuff. And that knocks out another collection update, and the next one will be all stuff that I got in Maryland, both from record stores there, and of course the vendors and people selling CDs, and actually some stuff that was given to me by fans there, which that was absolutely awesome of you guys to do. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on the channel, up in the bottom right-hand corner of our banner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size, and we even have hats too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, that is where to go, and the link is down below. And of course, thank you guys so much for all your support, all the likes, comments, shares, coming up to us and talking to us at shows, Maryland Death Fest was such an awesome experience, and if you haven't watched our recap over on Future Ruins channel, I strongly recommend it. Who knows, when this video comes out, it might be a thing that you've watched plenty of times, but if you haven't, check that out. And from there, we are on to other stuff. Our Meshuggah ranking, we're working on getting that together. More States of Metal stuff, working on some other ideas as well, just for like some fun content. And yeah, just kind of the usual thing here, just kind of overloading you guys in, well, tons of music to listen to out there. And I am going to be going on my trip down to Florida for the family vacay here soon. And believe me, I plan on coming back with a lot of stuff there too. So yeah, tons of stuff in the future. And of course, one more big thank you, because you guys absolutely rule. Thank you for everything you guys do. And we will catch you later.